today's video, I visit the beautiful Bowfiddle Rock and Rattray Head Lighthouse in Scotland to take and edit shots like these. Bowfiddle Rock is an amazing outcrop in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. It's a very popular spot among photographers and you may well have seen it 1,000 times on Instagram. Still, it was a new spot for me and I was keen to see what I could get. I started up high on the cliff edge, wanting to look down at the rock in the water. It's a less common shot, which is what I hoped to get, so I looked for compositions that included some of the various flowers around as foreground interest. I got lucky with these kayakers, their red vessels standing out brilliantly against the blue water. I was using a circular polarizing filter here, which controls reflections off the water, but I needed to use it subtly. If I used full polarization, the water turned very dark, which made the rock itself stand out less well. Instead, a little bit of polarization to just help bring out the water color worked well. I then went down to the water level itself and tried a variety of compositions using the craggy rocks as foreground interest. I was using slightly longer shutter speeds to blur the motion of the water as it cascaded over the rocks, using burst mode to get a variety of different shots with different patterns of water. Okay, so let's take a look at how I'd edit one of these shots. Now this is one that I've picked out. I really like the way that we've got these splashes down in the bottom of the frame, and we've got a really nice amount of foreground with this sort of craggy rocks. I'm just recording this from my iPad screen. I do a lot of editing on my iPad. If you've seen some of my videos before, then you have maybe seen some of my iPad workflow videos. Today I'm just recording the screen, which is not the easiest way to kind of see everything that I'm doing, but hopefully it's enough for you to kind of get an idea. I'm going to try and get through this pretty quickly though. Let's start off by just taking a look at what this looks like with various presets. Now, do not be afraid of using presets. It is not a cheat. It is not just applying another photographer's settings onto your own. They are a very good starting point to give you some inspiration of how you want your shots to look. So don't just one click and apply, but play around, see what kind of looks you get. Now, I know that I really like A6 RAW half. This is from a Visco preset pack. But I'm not sure on this one. I really like the kind of blues that we get from this one here. You know what? I think I do like A6 RAW, but I'm going to do a lot of tweaks. This is just a jumping off point. I'm going to press OK there and go into our colors. And I'm going to cool it right down, maybe even lower that tint just a few points, -4, something like that. It's already looking pretty good. In the light, I'm going to bring down those highlights, slightly bring up the shadows and slightly boost that contrast just a few points as well, just +5. And already I think we've got a bit more of a cinematic looking photo, but there's a lot more I'm going to do. I'm going to go straight into our color, and then I'm going to bring down the vibrance quite a bit and bring up that saturation. And I'm going to go into color mix now. Our color mix is where I'm going to do a lot of the work on this, because we've got these very sickly looking yellows and greens on this rock, which I don't really love. They don't really stand out very well. And the white balance hasn't captured them particularly well, so I want to give those a nice boost. So I'm going to grab this yellow hue and take it all the way down into the oranges. It's just started to lift some of those colors on those rocks around here. And I'm going to do the same with the greens, because I think a lot of that color is coming from the green. And indeed, yeah, if I just pulse this up and down, you can see just how much that changes. So I'm going to bring it down here. I'm just going to go back in, play around with the luminance, because I think if I raise that green a little bit, it just helps carve out some of that rock. Look what happens when I pulse this up and down. I think it looks much better with a little bit more brightness there. I'm just going to up that saturation slightly too. And let's see what we've got in the cyan channel. I think if I bring that slightly up into more of the blues, that's going to look a little bit better. And I'm going to bring that luminance down and also bring that saturation down a little bit. So I'm now going to go into the blues and I'm going to drag those a little bit more into the cyan. And I think that's going to help give a lot of contrast in the color between now having a more cyan blue against the orange of that rock. But I think I'm going to up the luminance ever so slightly and just up that saturation a little bit. Already I think this is looking a lot better, but I do want to just have a look, see what it looks like by going into the Adobe profiles and just having a look at Artistic 03, which I know basically gives a nice sort of warm orange tones, some nice more punchy blues. That's a little bit harsh, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. The difference with using these profiles rather than presets is that in the profiles, you've got this slider where you can apply the effect to a different degree, whereas your presets, you only either apply them or you don't. But I do like what that's done to those to the color on the rocks. It's brought it into a much sort of warmer orangey tone, and I think that looks really nice. So let's go back. So if we just have a look at the before, we've got sort of purpley blues and we've got very sort of sickly green on the rocks, and now we brought it into a much more cinematic looking orange and blue color scheme, which I think looks really nice. A few things I want to do with the sky though. First of all, I want to bring in a linear filter, and I'm just going to use this to desaturate a little bit. Now the rock itself is already pretty much free of any color, so this isn't doing a lot to the rock, but it is just taking out some of that blue in the sky, which I did think was a little bit overpowering after the color adjustments we'd made in the water. So that is just helping doing that. I'm now going to bring in a radial filter. I'm going to do a big one up here, huge filter, feather it off to 100%, and I'm going to increase the exposure by quite a bit, bring down the highlights, up the whites a little bit, and also add a little bit of warmth. Now what this is going to do is basically create a bit of side light coming in, and if I move this around you can kind of see it's almost like the sun is just sort of peeking out and hitting against those rocks. Because we did have a little bit of light, it was a very, very grey day, but you can just see that it is slightly brighter on the right side of the rocks than it is on the left. So I just want to emphasize that a little bit more. You can zoom out and get a better idea of where this is going. So I think just something like this looks pretty good. Could maybe even increase, no, leave that where it is. That's pretty good. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, but this one, I'm going to do it like this, and this one is just going to be reducing those shadows. Again, adding some brightness on one side, reducing the shadows on the other. Overall, I think that's giving a nice little extra boost of light. I think that looks really good. Few more things that I need to do on this shot. I need to enable lens corrections because there was some slight bowing because of the wide angle lens. And of course, we need to straighten our horizon. I think about there. Looks great. And I think actually I'm going to change the crop because 2x3 is a little bit tall and narrow. I think 4x5 is going to be a lot better. Just reducing some of the dead rock at the bottom. We don't need all of that. And also allows me to bring in some of that sky. I think having obeying the rule of thirds, as you can see, it was going along here and almost at the horizon, I think looks really nice. So if we press done there, I think that is looking better. But I do want to bring one more filter in, like this, on the sky, and I'm just going to darken it down. Maybe more like this. And maybe up that dehaze. Maybe not so much on the dehaze, actually. So I think this is looking pretty cool, actually. I'm going to up that saturation a little bit more. So if we have a look at our before, we've got purples, we've got sort of weird greeny tones. We've now got this cool looking, much more cinematic shot that I'm really quite keen on. I might do a few more tweaks on this, and even now bringing that temperature back down a little bit, I think looks quite cool. Always check your before and after. Check that what you're actually doing to your shot is what you want. But overall, I'm actually pretty happy with this. The last thing I do want to try is just bring in a brush, painting in a mask over this water like this. Be pretty rough with it, doesn't matter. And I'm going to just see what it's like adding in a bit of clarity, because as I do, if I pump that up and down, look at how much more detail suddenly is carved out of those waves where it's washed in around the rocks. I think that looks really nice. And a little bit of dehaze, something like that. And I might just see boost the saturation. What's it like? Let's take it to the top, and then we realize how bad it is. Take it back down, +10. I think that is a much nicer looking image overall. It is by no means one of my favorite images I've ever taken, but it was the middle of the day, very flat light, but I think we've been able to pull something a little bit more dramatic out, something that probably wouldn't be on my portfolio, but I would happily post at least to my Instagram page. Overall, I think I'm pretty happy with this. So let's move on. My next spot was Rattray Head Lighthouse, another hugely popular Instagram spot. I've seen so many incredible photos here, including some beautiful sunrises with amazing colours. Now, I was here in the middle of the day under harsh lighting, which did not look great, so I wanted to instead lean on using long exposures to add an ethereal dreaminess to the scene. I knew I wanted to use the waves on the sand as a foreground, forming lines that lead up towards the lighthouse, but getting this would mean putting the camera in the water. Now, the waves were quite strong, so I splayed the tripod legs wide to add extra stability and set the camera to interval mode so that it constantly kept taking photos. Now, this is important as every shot is different because of the way the waves wash up on the shore. Some shots there's barely any motion in the water, whereas others have great patterns formed by the water splashing on the sand, and it's those that I wanted to capture. The more shots you take, the more likely it is you'll get one that you really like. So jumping back into the edit here, and as you can see, as I just scroll through my Lightroom feed, I took a lot of photos when my camera was in this location because you do get so many different types of shot. Let's just take a look at this, for example. The waves are pretty much centered around the middle of the frame and down at the bottom. All this just wasted sand. It's just kind of an empty frame. Whereas on a different shot, let's say this one, for example, we've got so much more detail coming in from those waves. There's so much more going on. So it really is important to take loads and loads of shots. Every single one is different. Some of these, again, just are quite sparse, whereas others have a lot more going on. So it was a case of just taking lots and then going through and marking the ones that I like, marking the ones that I don't like. Some of them I've already done a few little tweaks on, this one for example. And I played around in my shutter speeds as well. Some of them I went for very long exposures, whereas some more like this was probably only about 0.6 seconds. So wanting to keep a lot of that texture of the water in there, but really kind of showing the motion of those waves as they crash on the beach. But I do like the ethereal look of some of the ones that I did with a much longer exposure. I really like this, the way that the water has kind of come up. This was 2 seconds, because you get that difference between the sand down here and then you get that impression of the water crashing on the sand. So it is worth playing around with different shutter speeds and seeing what you can get. But this shot particularly stood out to me because we've got that water splashing in as a 2-second exposure, but it's created this almost S curve that sort of moves its way up the frame, leading your eye towards the lighthouse. It's not such a long exposure that every little bit of water is blurred into nothing. We've still got some texture. We've still got these nice lines of the water as they've splashed in. And I really think this is a nice shot overall. So let's start off, and I'm just going to up that exposure because I do feel it's a little bit dark, but slightly bring back those highlights. And also let's go to our crop tool. I think that's actually dead straight already, so that's fine. Maybe I want to do the same as before and bring it in a little bit of a top and bottom. In fact, I do, because down here we've just got a lot of empty sand down there and a lot of empty sky at the top. I don't think we need, so just tightening up that composition I think it does a lot to improve this shot. Yeah, make sure, I definitely want the lighthouse to be right in the center of the frame, so I'm just going to pull it in from the right a little bit. I think about there is spot on. And again, I'm working on my iPad. I want this to be quite quick, so I'm going to have a look at some different presets. It's great for inspiration. I love the kind of greeny tones that we've got with this one. Much more cool blues here, loads of different looks that you can get, and it is always worth just going through, having a nice collection of presets, playing around, seeing what you can get. It doesn't mean that you just click once and then consider your photo done. You take that as a jumping off point and you see where you can get. Like, I really like these very, very sort of cool coastal tones. So actually, let's stick with F2 raw half. I think that's a good jumping off point, although I did just see G. No, let's stick with F. I think that's quite nice. Okay, let's bring back those highlights a little bit. I'm going to go into our color tones and I'm going to slightly increase that warmth. And I'm just going to move the tint up and down, see where I like it most, around there. I may not have moved it at all, can't remember what it was. And let's go back into our color mix, because I think there are some greens. In fact, there's not a lot of green. A little bit down in the bottom right of the frame, I'm noticing as I pulse this up and down, there's some changes. So I'm actually going to move that all the way down because I think that just allows that to blend more naturally. Yellows will do the same. Oh yeah, no, as soon as we start going too far, it goes very pink. So I'm just going to pump it down a little bit, -10. Those oranges will probably do the same thing. Yeah, so we don't want to do a lot there. But I do just want to slightly bring down the luminance, because as I darken that down, you can see what it's doing in just giving a little bit more contrast against the water splashing in. But again, subtle here, minus whatever that was, -9. Going to be a lot of aquas in this shot. I can tell that already. And at this point, it really comes down to your personal taste. Do you want them to be a bit more green and have a greeny sea? Do you want to move it more into like bluey, purpley tones? I actually think the latter looks quite nice. And I'm going to reduce that luminance a little and slightly up the saturation. I'm going to go into those purples just in case there's a purple cast in this. I can grab it in the hue and move it into the blues. And in those blues, let's have a little play here. And again, I think bringing that down slightly, -18, increasing the luminance a little bit, and maybe upping that saturation, I think looks pretty good. And if we have a look at the before, it's a very dark shot, colors aren't that vibrant. We've got a lot more going on here, and I really like how this looks already. And as a result, I don't really think that there's a lot more that I want to do. I think having a subtle approach with this shot, not overdoing the colors, not overdoing the different filters and things, keeping it looking a little bit like how it was on the day, but just enhanced that tiny amount, is pretty much all we need. But I do want to just try bringing in a filter from the bottom. I might not use this, but I want to see what it's like and upping that clarity, because clarity, again, is going to pull out a lot of those nice details of those waves. If I just pulse this up and down, you can see suddenly those waves go from being a little bit hazy, suddenly they become a lot more defined, and I like that a lot. So I'm going to go +30, and I'm going to check what the dehaze does, because obviously if you go too far, things get very, very, very bad. But I do like a little bit, just +8, just a small amount. I think that's looking good. I'm going to go back to our color, and I'm just going to knock it up a couple of notches towards the magenta side. Check out before and after. You know what? You can see how indecisive I am. I go back and forth, and I rarely consider photos done. I always go back, and I could be tweaking with these settings all day. So at a certain point, really, I have to consider it done. And I really like how that looks. Yeah, it's got quite I think quite a calming vibe. It's a sort of shot that I could imagine seeing printed and being up in, like, you know, a nice light, airy bedroom printed on the wall. You can see some of the other ones here, and what is also quite easy to do is to go, we can go copy settings, we can copy all of our settings, and we can go across to a shot like this one here with a lot more wave stuff going on, or this one, and we can just go paste settings, and we just put those same settings onto a new shot. And again, I think we've got a nice looking shot overall here. But I also find that some of these shots work really well in black and white. So I could go to our black and white tab. Some of these could look really nice, you know, different ways. This one carves out some more of that detail in the water. So let's go back, up that contrast, maybe up those shadows, up those whites. Go a little bit more moody with this edit. I can bring in this, darken this down, up those whites, definitely up that clarity to bring out some of those details, and a bit on that dehaze as well. But let's do the same on the top. Bring in another one. Darken it right down. Something like that. And again, we go big on the dehaze. We go big on the clarity. A lot of mood, a lot of drama. So we've got a very, very different type of shot. A lot of mood, stormy clouds rolling in, and that only took us, what, a couple of minutes maybe, just to do that black and white. So I think I'm going to call it a day there. What happens if I just copy these settings onto this one? Copy all, go to this, paste. Yeah, I mean, I do think the moody black and white looks really nice on this. I think I'm quite a fan. Yeah, I mean, I like that. Let me know what you think. Do you prefer the color edits, the light and colorful ones, or do you prefer these sort of moody black and white shots? But I will leave it there. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. Sorry that it's been a little bit rough and ready. There's a lot going on at the moment, and my studio is not set up ready for proper recording, so you'll have to bear with me. But I didn't want to miss a week, and particularly not when I've just come back from taking some, I'm hoping you will agree, are at least fairly nice photos. If you have enjoyed this video, then do please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.